In 1953, Naomi and David Scott were house hunting in Lynwood, California, and after much searching, came upon an interesting house in Lugo Avenue. They had a for sale sign out front. It was an unusual European design with vines growing up and down its stone walls. The whole house was surrounded in shrubbery and trees, which gave it a sense of privacy and seclusion. They looked around to see if anyone could show them around, and even though there was a real estate sign, they were unsure whether the house was vacant or not. Nevertheless, they decided to approach the house, and as they drew closer, they could see that the house had long been neglected, and what would have once been beautifully landscaped had now become overgrown with weeds, growing in between flower beds. The pathway leading up to the front of the property was also overgrown, and they both realised that if they were to buy the property, it would need a lot of work. They continued to walk around the house, where they came upon more overgrown shrubs and flower beds. When they reached the rear of the house, they came upon an attractive patio, but other than that, nobody had bothered to look after this once picturesque property, and had let it deteriorate, which was a shame. They did not understand how the surrounding houses were all well kept except for this one, and why hadn't the agents employed a gardener to at least make the house more presentable. They were later able to gain access to the house via the patio door, and once inside, saw further signs of neglect. And even though the house was furnished, it was obvious that nobody had lived there for many years, as the inside was covered in dust and spider webs. The outside and inside of the house had not had any loving attention for a long time, but they felt at home, with the feeling that the house was giving them a welcoming hug. They proceeded to walk from room to room that were grey with blackened windows, and if they were able to purchase the house, it would take many months of cleaning before they could make it livable again. As they carefully studied both the structure and furniture, they could plainly see there was nothing actually broken or damaged, and was certainly not beyond repair, just very grubby and dirty. Otherwise, it was in excellent condition. They left the house feeling that it was already theirs, and then planned the next move, even before checking with the agents whether anyone had made an offer or whether the house's cost was beyond what they could afford. Choosing to ignore their inner doubts, they knew that the house was perfect for them, as it was the right size and not too big to look after, while at the same time was spacious and quiet, as it sat amongst a garden that they would return to its former glory. They left the house filled with excitement, and as they walked down the side path towards Elm Street, they both had the distinctive feeling that they were being watched, and turned around to see who it was, but there was nobody there. They immediately drove down to the real estate office to make inquiries, and were elated to find that the property wasn't only for sale, but it was in their price range. What the couple also observed was that the agent appeared very eager to sell the house, as it had been on his books for a long while, and other than the hard work that was needed, why it had been vacant for so long. A few weeks later, they moved in, and first started work on the bedroom, and then the kitchen, and so forth, until their hard work slowly paid off, until they were now looking at a livable environment. After completing the inside, it was now time to tackle the garden, but decided to wait until spring. They initially employed the assistance of a local gardener, and they worked extremely hard until the garden was once again looking beautiful. They realised that the previous owners liked rare plants, other than the usual ordinary flowers, and they'd done their best to turn the garden back to its original design. The inside and outside of the house was now fully restored, while they stood back and admired their hard work. The house was now a mixture of its former owner's old world and intermingled with theirs. The house was once again a model of Victorian living. After 1 year, they had completed all the necessary work and could stand back and admire the house, knowing they'd made the right decision. One summer day, Naomi was at home by herself and was working in the rose garden, and suddenly felt the presence of someone standing close by. She quickly looked up and was startled to see a small elderly lady, dressed in old-fashioned clothing. In a high-pitched voice, the elderly lady apologised for frightening her, and then added, would it be all right if she looked around a bit? And then said, you see, my husband and I originally built this place. Naomi was shocked that after so many years after being neglected, the owner had decided to return to her old house. At the same time, Naomi felt a sense of pride that she could show her all of the hard work that had been done to restore it. She said to the lady that it was a beautiful place and beckoned the elderly lady to come closer. And they walked together admiring the restorative work, where the lady admired each shrub. "Oh, you've got pink roses where the tea roses used to be. How thoughtful." The lady then hopped from flower to flower, inspecting each one, and then pointed to each rare plant. "I am so pleased you have brought life back into the house. So pleased," she kept repeating. Then the lady said, "Oh, the begonia over there, it's still missing. Can you fix that?" and then rushed to another part of the garden. Naomi then asked the lady whether she'd like to see inside of the house, and the lady was happy for the invitation. Once inside, the lady said, "Over there was where the grandfather clock used to be, and now you've moved it to the den." Naomi thought, how did she know we'd moved it to the den? She also admired the new furniture before walking across to the other end of the long room. The lady then pointed to an oaken chair and said, "That's where my husband died after coming inside from raking leaves." Naomi studied the old lady and noticed how ethereal she looked, yet her eyes had an unusual bright sparkle in them. "I'd like to have another look at the patio if I may," and then walked towards some roses. The old lady then whispered, "They were always my favourite." "Oh, then let me pick you a bunch to take home," said Naomi. She then reached back to pick up some scissors, and when she turned around, found the lady had suddenly vanished. Naomi thought it rude of the lady to disappear so quickly, and wondered where she could have gone, as she certainly couldn't have gone far. Naomi quickly ran into the street to catch up with her, but she was nowhere to be seen, and thought nobody could have gotten away that quickly, and the fact that she was very old. Surely there must be some explanation for the lady's sudden disappearance, and initially thought she must have been dreaming, until she went into the garden and saw the small footsteps that she'd left on the soft soil. A few weeks later, Naomi was having tea with the neighbour across the street, and decided to bring up her elderly visitor. "Oh," said the neighbour, "anyone I might know?" "Perhaps you do, because she claims she and her husband used to live there." The neighbour gave her a strange look, and then Naomi continued. She said the lady was wearing a faded pink dress, and that she and her husband had built the house. The neighbour then looked at Naomi and said, "Impossible. That woman's been dead for many years." Naomi then let out a nervous laugh. "But that cannot be. I saw her as plainly as I now see you." The neighbour said she must be talking about someone else, but then Naomi mentioned how the woman pointed at the oaken chair, saying how her husband had died there after raking leaves. The neighbour suddenly went very pale and said that was exactly how her husband had died. "How would you know that?" Naomi said, "I didn't. That's what the old lady told me." The neighbour said, "How can that be? They have both been dead for years and years." Naomi then stared at the neighbour and said, "You mean I was visited by a ghost?" "Seems that way," said the neighbour. "But we shook hands, and they felt fine to me." At that moment, Naomi went over the details in her head, where she had not heard the lady enter her garden, and when she looked up, the lady seemed to appear out of nowhere, standing there smiling at her. She heard no footsteps when coming or going. How she knew all of the plants so well, and how she suddenly vanished in an instant. Naomi realised that the old lady had returned to the garden only after they'd gone to a lot of trouble restoring it, and wanted to come back to visit her old home and garden, and came back to compliment Naomi on her hard work.